The title for our sermon this morning is The Minority Report. This is based on Numbers chapter 13, verses 30 to 32. Then Caleb quieted the people and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession of the land, for we are well able to overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against this people, for they are stronger than us." And they gave the children of Israel an evil report of the land they had spied out. On this Charter Day weekend, I invite you to consider the place of courage in your life. Courage is a spark from heaven which permits us to face our fears, whether those be physical or spiritual. If you think about it, our life shrinks or expands in proportion to our level of courage. When we are feeling brave, we're optimistic, encouraged, hopeful, buoyed. And when we're feeling fearful, we become pessimistic, discouraged, hopeless, deflated. In this sermon today, we will be exploring the spiritual significance of the two reports given to Moses by the 12 spies after they returned from their 40-day surveillance trip behind enemy lines in the Promised Land. One of the reports, delivered by the majority, invoked a fearful, negative mindset, and it contained a shockingly abrupt dismissal of God's capabilities. The other report, delivered by the minority, invoked a courageous, positive mindset, full of confidence in God's capabilities. Well, courage is a good topic to consider this weekend because we are all, in one way or another, beneficiaries of those who had the courage to found the Academy of the New Church, the educational arm of this church organization. Without the founding of the Academy, we would have no priests, no teachers, no schools, no formal systematic means to educate young minds so that they might, in adult age and of their own free will, receive the Lord in his second coming, and thereby help establish the Lord's new church on earth. It took courage to do these things because the founders of the Academy dared to be different. Those who signed the Academy Charter in 1877 knew that their ranks were small and that they were a minority group. They knew that they and future generations would face spiritual persecution from the hells. They knew that they and future generations would face ridicule and belittlement from a secular world that seemed so much stronger and better positioned to be successful. They knew that they and future generations would face skepticism and cynicism, that the experiment would work. And yet here we are, 147 years later, celebrating this noble cause. In turning to our story, you can imagine the tension in the air as everyone waited to hear the report of the 12 spies. In just a few short months, the Lord, through Moses, had led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt into the freedom of open land. The Lord had demonstrated his power and protection to the Israelites in miraculous and dramatic ways, by parting the Red Sea, by feeding the multitudes with manna and quail, by providing them with clean water in the desert, by delivering the Ten Commandments at the top of Mount Sinai in the midst of lightning and thunder and earthquakes. And now the Lord had taken them to the threshold of their new home, a land flowing with milk and honey. What would the spies say? Well, the two reports were obviously complete opposites, even though the 12 spies were all staring at the same thing. One of the reports was negative, the other positive. One invoked fear, the other invoked courage. One recommended turning around and going back to Egypt. The other recommended going forward and trusting the Lord. Looking closer, though, the distinguishing feature between the two reports has to do with sequence and with content. In terms of sequence, the negative report given by the 10 spies, the majority, came first. And this is a key point to remember. Now, if anyone in that audience on that day had been feeling hopeful that maybe, just maybe, the Israelites could indeed enter into Canaan as the Lord had promised, that hope was immediately dashed. Because the 10 spoke, and this is what they said. We went into the land, and it truly flows with milk and honey. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. Their cities are fortified and large. We are not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger than us. This is a land that devours its inhabitants. The men are of great stature. We were like grasshoppers in our own sight and in their sight. Now, in our own lives, this is how the sequence goes in our struggles, our trials. The sequence is twofold. Evil spirits are always the first to make their move. We're taught in the teachings of our church that evil spirits always attack first, accusing and condemning us and invoking fear. And this has the effect of completely flooding us, paralyzing us with fear, as it did the Israelites. And then there's the question of content in this first report. In the majority report of the 10 spies, which came first, there is no mention of the Lord, what he could do, or what he had done. The 10, the majority, didn't just give a bad or negative report, as some translations have it. The Hebrew word literally means evil. They gave an evil report. And why was it evil? It was evil because they were trying to remove God from the equation, from the decision. We know this to be the case because when Caleb spoke up and contradicted their report with a positive one, it says in our story that they said to one another, "Let us select a new leader and return to Egypt." And when Joshua joined Caleb, and again contradicting their report with a positive one, it says the people made a move to stone them with stones. This is why it was an evil report. So what about the minority report, the one given by Caleb and Joshua? Well, consider first the meaning of their names. Caleb's name in Hebrew means faithful, wholehearted, bold, brave, devoted. Joshua's name in Hebrew means Yahweh saves, helper, deliverer. So in terms of sequence and what they represent, they had a bold and powerful response to what the 10 had just said. Caleb responded with the words of our text, "Let us go up at once and take possession of the land, for we are well able to overcome it." Hadn't Caleb been listening? Hadn't he heard the dire report just given by everyone except him? Wasn't it game over? The majority had spoken. But then Joshua joins Caleb, and together they say this: "The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." What a beautiful response. Again, it's one that mirrors what the teachings of our church say about the sequencing that happens in our own spiritual struggles and battles. And the point is that there are always two distinct parts to our struggles, just as there were two reports. The hells attack first with a barrage of negative, fearful thoughts and feelings, and then the Lord, by means of his angels, moves in with a divine response. And in coming to our defense, angels work to take away our fear, for as one teaching says, once fear is removed, hope is at hand. And what about the content of the minority report? Well, it had everything that the angels in heaven bring to our attention when they come to our defense, when they come to remind us that we can indeed be strong and of good courage, as we recited in our recitation this morning, and that we can be strong and of good courage when we place our hope and trust in the Lord. One teaching specifically says that the Lord, by means of his angels, keeps us in hope and trust, which become the forces of combat by which we resist the negative attack of the hells. I love that wording, the forces of combat. Hope and trust in the Lord become our forces of combat. Now, of course, the story ends with the children of Israel rejecting the report of Caleb and Joshua. And so everyone, except Caleb and Joshua, is destined to spend their remaining years wandering the wilderness, never to set foot in the promised land. But the principle still stands. Every day we have a choice as to which report we will listen to, because this is how temptation works. Our default response, the one we're born with, the one we're inclined to go with, has us caving in, giving in to the fears and negative thought patterns that create much of the chatter in our mind. And in our early days, we don't even hear the response from Caleb and Joshua, the response of the angels. This default response has us wandering in the wilderness for a symbolic 40 years. The point being that we have wilderness tasks to do, which are represented by the steps of repentance. But our focus today is on Caleb and Joshua's report, because this represents a new kind of response in us. A response that surprises us at first because we didn't know we had it in us to be brave and courageous in the face of our fears, fears which in the past would have paralyzed us. You see, the Lord is constantly inviting us to take the narrow path, the road less traveled. So many of the Lord's teachings are couched in these terms. Here are a few of them. Narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. Many are called, but few are chosen. The harvest is indeed plentiful, but the laborers are few. Spiritually speaking, when we choose to accept the minority report, we will feel as if we're alone, among the few, doing the difficult work. And we will have our doubts, as we learned in one of our lessons today. Swedenborg himself, the revelator, experienced this feeling when he received a letter from his publisher saying only 4 copies of the first volume of Arcana Celestia had been sold in the last 2 months. Like Caleb and Joshua, new beginnings can feel scary. When we take a minority position, we can feel like lone voices in a world that doesn't seem to care or even notice what we have to say. But is this really true? When the Lord talks about the way being difficult and narrow and that few find it, is the Lord suggesting that this is a permanent condition, that it will always be this way? Well, history has taught us otherwise. The spread of the writings, for example, especially during Swedenborg's time, was painfully slow and discouraging. But today, thanks to the internet and a number of brave souls working in the Lord's vineyard, millions of people now know about the teachings of the new church. The same is true of the Academy movement, which we are celebrating this Charter Day weekend. Those who signed the Academy Charter dared to be different. They and future generations knew that they were in a minority group. They knew that they would face persecution, setback, discouragement, even ridicule, and yet they had the courage, the conviction, the spirit of Caleb and Joshua to persevere because of their faith and trust and confidence in the Lord. Everything starts off small with a few. Why else would the Lord say the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed? Everything good, true, noble, and kind and hopeful starts off small like a seed, but over time will blossom and grow until eventually it becomes like a tree, tall, noble, standing strong. This has been a sermon about courage, and we need courage for a lot of things, don't we? We need that spark from heaven to help us face our fears because life shrinks or expands in direct proportion to our level of courage. We need courage to say we're sorry. We need courage to ask for help. We need courage to accept advice. We need courage to ask for forgiveness. We need courage to face adversity, to face our demons, to go the extra mile, to turn the other cheek. We need courage to admit when we are wrong. And yes, we need courage to smile and take a deep breath. And we need courage to not be so hard on ourselves and on others. And let us remember that falsity, the lies of the hells, the negative report of the 10, draws its energy from fear. It is the first thing to make an impression on us, and sadly is often the last impression left on us. But then comes the Lord's truth, the positive report of Caleb and Joshua, which gains its energy and momentum and strength the moment we embrace it. We will be given this courage when we, like Caleb and Joshua, invoke a positive mindset, a mindset that gives the glory to the Lord, a mindset that still has its doubts, but which has also seen what the Lord can do, a mindset that is confident in his redemptive power. For in the words of Joshua, if the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Amen.